Hello. Today we'll talk about a very interesting Argentinian architect who lived and worked in Italy, Giuseppe Perugini, who lived between 1914 and 1995. What is it about Argentinian architects? They have not only great soccer players, but they also have great architects and great writers and great who knows what else. Bravo to them. So Giuseppe Perugini arrived in Rome in the early 30s and enrolled in the Faculty of Architecture. After graduating in 1941, he began an intense teaching and research activity at the Faculty of Architecture as a professor of architectural composition. A further demonstration of his desire to experiment is the fact that he was among the first scholars to propose in the 1960s the use of computers as instrument authorizing modular elements. To this end, he presented a series of projects to international competitions, such as the circular bridge over the Strait of Messina, the Plateau Beaubourg Tower Helix, born from the integration of particularly expressive signs and avant-garde technological choices, and others, such as the well-known cybernetic hospital or the UNIDO headquarters in Vienna, where the function is privileged through the decomposition and recomposition of cells aggregated electronically according to the actual needs, thus eliminating the conventional dispersions of the traditional architectural object. So this Argentinian architect who lived and worked in Rome created some interesting things. His first work, the monument to the Fossa Ardeatine in Rome, I don't know even if I read correctly. At the same time, architectural structure, symbol and memorial appears as a unique tomb, while the buildings of the judicial city were configured as a true citadel, inspired by the urban aspect of the justice of the classical age. He was an experimental architect, interested in many things. Also belonging to the same ideology are the church sacrarium of Piedimonte Sari Germano, the aforementioned bridge of Messina, the kinetic explosion of the project of an exhibition pole in the Fortezza da Basso in Florence, the binomial matter music of the Memorial Fermi Prism in Chicago. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of images with all these projects, but we see that Giuseppe Perugini was indeed a man ahead of his time in a certain way. And I think what kept him going and the interest in his work derives exactly from this experimental side. While he doesn't look particularly happy in this picture, I'm sure he was, because experiment does activate your ludic disposition and certainly responds to your curiosity, and this is not a little thing. So sperimentale house, the experimental house, which is probably the best known work by him, I will present it in detail in the following images. It's also called Casa Albero, this experimental house. And just a second, something happened here. Okay, moving forward. Casa Sperimentale in Italian at Perugini, near Roma, or Rome, the capital of Italy, from 1969. Architects Giuseppe Perugini, Ugo de Plezant, Reinaldo Perugini, and the design and construction took place between 1968 and 1975. Location, Perugini, Italy. Designed by Giuseppe Perugini with Ugo de Plezant and Reinaldo Perugini, Casa Sperimentale, also known as Casa Albero or Tree House, was built on a large, well-treed corner plot in an area of villas within the pine forest at Perugini, Italy. The house was constructed between 1968 and 1965, so approximately 50 years ago, or 60 years ago, actually. No, 50, sorry, as an experimental villa for weekend occupation, whatever that could mean, weekend occupation. Perugini, a coastal resort about 30 kilometers from Rome, became culturally proeminent in the 1960s and 1970s when it was at the center of the world of cinema and fashion. It was used as a location by Federico Fellini, the great Italian film director, who shot some of the scenes of The White Sheikh, Juliet of the Spirits, and La Dolce Vita in the large pine forest in which Casa Albero was built. Fellini had a summer house there. I love Federico Fellini. So let's read a little bit about this house. The history of the building, its design and significance. From the 1960s, Perugini was among the first to explore the application of the language of computer programming to the design of buildings. 1960s. Casa Sperimentale investigated the possibilities for an architecture of rotating structures and prefabricated elements, and was of a deliberately unfinished nature. The house comprised several experimental structures. The house itself, a suspended structure formed of a series of reinforced concrete frames, supporting plates of standardized size, divided by glass inserts with a ground level spa and pool. A sphere of 5 meters diameter in the grounds, with a bedroom, kitchen and bathroom, and the cubes, a sequence of 3 by 3 by 3 meters cubes containing 2 rooms and the kitchen, separated by 2 modules of 3 by 1.5 meters for the bathrooms. The building consists of 4 elements that can all be considered individual projects and are quite distinct in what they represent and how they are designed. 1, the house; 2, the sphere; 3, the guest houses, and the fence. And now let's see some images after so many words. This is the house, and I think it's very striking. I mean, the functionalist and the mercantile minds would say we don't need something like this. But I think for the spirit is an encouragement to go on, to move on, to live, in other words, because it is fresh, even if it is here in a state of abandonment and maybe even vandalized, but it doesn't matter. The spirit of the architect is in the building, and the building has a freshness of vision, which I think we need badly in order not to die of boredom in this life. So again, yes, the building was abandoned, the building was vandalized, but the freshness of the vision is still there. And I think this building by itself is saying clear-cut yes to both architecture and life. And I think we need such statements wherever and whenever is possible, because life in the absence of creativity becomes indeed unbearable. There are sophisticated things here. Look at the steel, the concrete frame, the structure, the way it supports with this intermediate red element rotated, metallic as it is, the slab of the superior level. And I think this shows a deep knowledge about not just about structure, but also about the value of the third element, the transitional element, the the in-between element, because an architect less skillful than Giuseppe Perugini would not have used these intermediate elements, which give the building a certain elan vital, if I am to say so. And I also like the chromatics, because you have the concrete, which is grayish, and then you have the redness of metallic elements. You have the rotation. You also have the X, which probably would have pleased Elon Musk. So this is a building which says yes to life, yes to the adventure of life, yes to the adventure of architecture. Yes, it was costly to have all these structural concrete elements that consume some resources. But again, what is the purpose here? The purpose is to create a building that is enticing, that is inciting, and its originality is not diminished by who knows what knowledge of the history of modern architecture and so on, because here indeed it is a fresh vision about the building. In my opinion, this building is more interesting than Villa Savoye. Sorry, Mr. Le Corbusier, I love Le Corbusier, but I don't think Villa Savoye is truly such a great building. And I think Bernard Tschumi was correct when at one moment, when Villa Savoye was in a dilapidated state, and it was truly a depressed building, so to speak, he said the most architectural thing about this building is the state of decay it is in. But in this case, this building, although it does have decay, and it was vandalized and it was abandoned, I think its spirit is not diminished by decay. Maybe it's even amplified. And yes, there are all kinds of little discoveries to be made here. These spheres are intriguing. Look even at those steps leading into the sphere. And so you see, even if the building was clearly vandalized, I think it's still a fresh architectural statement, full of potential and full of encouragement to continue to hope and to create and to envision unseen before buildings. Yes, it polluted. Now concrete pollutes, but at the time when it was built, there wasn't a concern with polluting aspects of concrete. I still think it's one of the most remarkable villas, if we are to call it so, a villa built, by the moderns. And this is Giuseppe Perugini, Argentinian architect who lived and worked in Italy. Because, what I see here, I see also playfulness. And yes, we need seriousness, we need work, but work in the absence of play cannot arrive truly at creativity. Johann Huizinga, in his book Homo Ludens, says it very clearly. In order to create, you have to unite work with play. That's why he called the book Homo Ludens. And here we see the playful capacity of man, in this case, an architect. There is playfulness here. And yes, okay, there are graffitis, there is the building was abandoned, but that playfulness is still present. And I think we need playfulness in our lives, and not just in the weekends. Preferably and hopefully during the so-called working days as well, because work without play is not enough. Maybe I'm subjective, and I probably am, but I don't think the graffitis subtracted anything from the qualities of the building. Yes, they are there. The architect didn't envision them, didn't plan them, didn't expect them. But I think the building is still somehow alive through its spirit. And look, look at this. Even so-called details are magnificently original. You know, it's a little detail, so to speak, but it's done creatively. It's not a building that repeats what other people did. Giuseppe Perugini, very interesting architect, actually. And when you read also that in the 60s he was advocating, you know, the participation of computation or of the computer to the profession of architecture, you are astounded, no? I mean, in the 60s, there were no personal computers really. How come he had this vision? I could describe this building as a joyous ruin. Well, not in all respects and in all pictures it's so joyous, but all in all, I think it's a building which shows clearly the potentiality, the potential of an architecture with a disposition for playing as well, for playfulness, less inhibited and less inhibiting. I'm almost sure that the Stel people, you know, like Theo van Dersburg and Gary Driedveld would have loved this building. That's what I think. Although Theo van Dersburg apparently was a difficult man, but I think he would have loved it too. I like to think. And maybe even across centuries, a painter like Hieronymus Bosch, because there is some kind of a surrealism here. And even if you worked with cubes and spheres, you know, explicit geometries, all in all, the impression is of a very special building, indeed, as an experimental house. I like to think that even Frank Lloyd Wright would have liked it, although this architecture is very different from his architecture. But look, the same thing that he did I commented on, look at the bottom. He also understood, this Argentinian architect, that the column, you know, should spring from the slab underneath and aspire towards the slab above through an intermediate entity. And here we see it. And this makes the column less predictably heavy and less you know, stern. And that rotated X, metallic as it is and painted in red, adds something special to the building. And you see, it's a trademark of the building. Giuseppe Perugini. It is clear that without a liking and an openness towards you know, the ludic aspects of doing architecture, he could not have done this building, not in this way. Maybe sometimes, in some cases, Constantin Brâncuș was correct. Architecture is an inhabitable sculpture. Although I think there are some differences between sculpture and architecture, but sculpturalness does add to a building, and this is the elevation of the building. Now you tell me if this is an inferior building to Villa Savoie. I don't think it is. You could say it's more irresponsible, whatever that word means. And although it is the product of the human intellect and the human talent and the human work, I think the trees on the right side of this picture and the building complement each other in a rather good way. I don't think the building is insulting the trees. not even in this decayed state. Sorry about these plans. I don't know if I have. It was a little bit difficult to find information. Here you see the plan of the house and an elevation and the section, but sorry, the resolution is not great. But you can still see something there. It's not as irrational as it might appear. You see, he uses squares, he uses cubes, he uses the grid even, but the overall impression is of a ludic architecture. And this is a later day, elevation of the building. The rebirth of Casa Albero, apparently there were a few years ago or some years ago attempts to restore it. So let's read a little bit about this. Rome, 2020. So 3 years ago, 25 years have passed since the death of architect Perugini, and his Casa Sperimentale is still being talked about. It has deservedly returned to the public spotlight thanks to an exhibition at the Weissenhof Gallery in Stuttgart and the establishment in Rome of a committee tasked with its protection. The Comitato Permanente per la Tutela, sorry, this is in Italian and I don't know Italian. No, it's just the Comitato Permanente per la Tutela della Casa Albero, the Committee for the Protection of the Treehouse, has already cleaned the pala and other sections in the main structure of the graffiti that has built up over the years of neglect. The new organization's intention, espoused by the current owner, architect Reynaldo Perugini, is that Casa Albero should become a public space, a cultural center that can host initiatives and events aimed at enhancing its educational and cultural potential. This signals a return to its origins for Perugini's work, with its intrinsically experimental and open nature, in a reversal of the degradation and neglect that we are unfortunately used to seeing in Italy. Obviously, the author of this text is Italian. Our small initiative, undertaken with open hearts and lights, is intended to help spread the word about an important but little known architectural work and about the passion that drives the volunteers of the committee for its rediscovery and reassessment. Very nice. So over the years, people uniting in order to protect this building and give it a new life. This is a rendering of our time, and the lighting company proposing some, forms of bringing artificial light to the building. This is I think here I end this presentation on this about this building. This is actually the tomb, the grave of Perugini, and maybe that cube, which is rather fragile and vulnerable in its positioning, represents his own life and his own attempts of doing unexpected architecture. You wonder how that cube was, sits like this in just one point. I guess it was all properly planned and executed. Now I show another work by Perugini, which is also excellent, but very different from the experimental house. Mausoleo delle Fosse Ardeatine in Roma, in Italy, and he worked with these other people. and it's an earlier work, I think, or well, I don't have the year when he built it. So it's a mausoleum, but I think here we see again a mature architect, quite capable of expressing different ideas for different contexts differently, and it's a striking mausoleum, very abstract, and you don't need too many explanations to come across this building and understand it is a mausoleum. And look at the inside, you know, there are these graves, these tombs. It's a collective, it's a graveyard, you know, collective, a small enclosed cemetery. But I imagine that visiting it, this heavy, large slab, concrete slab, does push downwards and creates the necessary gravity and seriousness which such a function would require. So I think they did, because there were several architects here working on this project, Giuseppe Perugini included. I think they created